The president has the right to fire any federal employee. But the fact is, if it looks like it's in retaliation for something that the IG, the Inspector General, is doing, that could be unlawful.
That's Speaker Pelosi talking about just the latest Inspector General who's been fired by this president. Now, it makes it 4 in just the past 6 weeks. Now, it's a good time to remind everybody that IGs, they're independent watchdogs who are by definition apolitical. They follow the money, not either political party. Steve Linick, he was State Department IG until he was shown the door this past Friday evening. He was reportedly investigating Secretary of State Mike Pompeo for various things, including whether or not Pompeo inappropriately used government planes for flights to Kansas when he was considering a Senate run. Also, a whistleblower filed a complaint saying Pompeo possibly misused his staff by having an aide walk his dog, pick up his dry cleaning, make restaurant reservations for Pompeo and the missus. Also, and probably more significantly, NBC News reporting that Linick was investigating Pompeo's decision to approve massive arms sales to Saudi Arabia, even though both Democrats and Republicans in Congress had objected. Those multi-billion-dollar deals, they were approved after the Saudis murdered Jamal Khashoggi, a former reporter for the Washington Post. Also, we sold arms to the Saudis as they were accused of war crimes in Yemen as they continued to bomb civilians. Now, these are the other IGs who were cut loose. Early last month, the Intelligence Committee watchdog Michael Atkinson, he was fired. He handled the Ukraine whistleblower complaint that led to Trump's impeachment. 3 days later, Defense Department Inspector General Glenn Fine was removed. He, a key figure overseeing trillions of dollars that the government was set to spend to keep the economy afloat. Then, on May 1st, Christy Grimm was gone. Grimm, the watchdog for the HHS, and she had released a report saying that hospitals, they were struggling to respond to the COVID outbreak due to shortages of things like testing supplies and PPE. It's all part of a familiar pattern for this president. Eliminate oversight, eroding separation of power, and refuse to allow anyone to look into what he and his people are doing. I want to bring in our guest to discuss, former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Gene, always good talking to you. How you holding up?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I got a few questions, and they all follow a continued pattern, if you will, about accountability or lack thereof. As best I could, I gave the recent examples of the inspector generals, but their job is really just to make sure that we're not having abuses of power within the respective agencies that they're supposed to police. Talk about the danger if they come back, report facts that happen not to be whoever the president is and his or her liking, the idea that they'll be canned if they so much as say a bad word.
Okay, here's the purpose of an inspector general. And I have to say this about Steve Linick before I get to the role of an IG. I worked with Steve Linick in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia. At one time, we literally had 2 jury trials across the hall from each other. He has more integrity in his entire pinky than I have in my entire body. So his integrity is unblemished. Now let's go to the role of an inspector general. They are political appointees, and President Trump does, in fact, have the right to appoint an inspector general. But the custom and practice for decades has been once they're appointed, you leave them alone unless they are doing something grossly improper or there's malfeasance. You never remove an inspector general if they're doing their job. And that's the punchline of this whole crisis.
And to me, what has been mystifying is if you're the Senate and you remain quiet about this, it is the people's money. It's not the administration using discretionary funds. They asked Congress, they got appropriated $3 trillion to try and keep the economy afloat. Why wouldn't we want to have an inspector general as a watchdog? It's Congress who appropriated the money as it relates to, or didn't appropriate the money as it relates to where the money was going to be poured to as it goes to the Saudis. It was the idea that if they stay quiet, I'm talking about Republicans on the Hill, they're denuding themselves. Now I get to another branch, the judicial branch. And Gene, talk about how important what the Supreme Court is going to decide as to whether or not a president really is accountable to anyone, because it's President Trump believes, as a sitting president, he is not subject to the rule of law in effect. And what they decide with his financial records and also with his tax returns, talk about how that's more than just what the guy's really worth or not, but what the role of any checks and balances there are in the president.
Okay, when the Constitution was passed way back in 1789 or proposed to the states, they had 3 equal branches of government. And they were worried that we would have an unchecked, and I got to put underline, italicized, bold, an unchecked president. As a matter of fact, George Washington was a little uncomfortable in being called president. He didn't like that. So what the Supreme Court is going to do in this tax case, a financial records case, and in the subpoenas cases, they are really going to set the stage for the next 5, 10, 50 years, the parameters for president. And we thought that in United States versus Nixon, way back in the day, 1974, that the issue was decided and that was it. No, the Supreme Court could decide the fate of this democracy with the 1 or 2 rulings that they have before them, because here's the problem. If we don't allow Congress to serve subpoenas on the executive branch and to investigate misconduct by cabinet officials and the president, then we have no rule of law.
Well, and it goes to even a more immediate issue, and that is, what if you use the Justice Department to go after political enemies? We all know with Ukraine trying to dig up dirt here to go after someone, but what about the actual Justice Department? And this is what William Barr had to say earlier today, because the president made it clear that he believed that Obamagate, and we still don't even know what the crime, and even the president couldn't say what exactly it was worse even than Watergate, and he wanted basically the DOJ to go after both the former president and Joe Biden. But this is what the Attorney General today had to say.
As to President Obama and Vice President Biden, whatever their level of involvement, based on the information I have today, I don't expect Mr. Durham's work will lead to a criminal investigation of either man. Our concern over potential criminality is focused on others.
Okay, so give me your BS transcriber here, cut through this. Maybe the president didn't like what he heard out of the AG, but wasn't this all cockamamie to begin with? That there was no one could even define exactly what some criminal conspiracy was that they supposedly alleged, and if the intelligence basic agencies can't alert if there's a problem right now, then maybe we're arguably even in bigger trouble than we think.
Okay, here's the problem with Attorney General Barr. If you go back to his misstating of the Mueller report, his comments on Roger Stone, the thing he's doing with Flynn, the whole Durham report, there's a credibility issue, and it's troubling. It is very troubling. I want to say this about Attorney General Barr. I'm grateful that he has cleared President Obama, and I assume he's clearing Vice President Biden. But the whole wink and the nod that we're not done, it could be others. Well, it could be others who worked in the White House, who were close advisors of President Obama. And what's the core issue? That Obama et al. Unmasked people who were talking on wiretaps with Russian officials? The whole purpose of unmasking, which is very common, thousands of people are unmasked. That whole process is necessary to allow law enforcement to find who is on the call with Russian agents. I can't think of a more legitimate law enforcement purpose than unmasking somebody who's caught on tape with a foreign agent, such as what was Michael Flynn. So what bothers me about Attorney General Barr is he has lost tremendous credibility. And that is why I am proud to say I am signing an amicus brief with that'll be filed with Judge Emmett Sullivan probably tomorrow, opposing the dismissal of the Michael Flynn charges. It's going to be signed, I hope, by about 1,000 former prosecutors, Democrats and Republicans.
Well, we look forward to that, Gene, and it's really strange when you live in this surreal time where even though they pled guilty to 2 charges and he even admitted to lying about other things as well to the feds, that he's the victim right now and that we need to basically relitigate how we even got to that point. But that is the day we live in. We'll look forward to, as we said, that letter coming out as early as you said is tomorrow. Gene Rossi, as always, my friend, thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir.
All right, everyone, when we come back, an investigative reporter with the Washington Post will join us to describe what she has learned about the crisis that is our nation's nursing homes and how they're handling or mishandling the COVID outbreak.